Thank you for joining us for Straight Thinking, a podcast from Reasons to Believe. Reasons to Believe, integrating science and faith. And now, here's your host, Joe Aguirre.
Welcome to Straight Thinking, a GPS for the Christian mind. This is Average Joe Aguirre with theologian and philosopher Kenneth Samples and physicist Dave Rogstad. On today's podcast, we discuss name-calling. What is this logical fallacy and how do we avoid it? Well, Ken, as fallen human beings, this one is tough to avoid. We like to call people names all the time, don't we?
I had a student in one class. We were talking about the ad hominem, attack against the person. And he said to me, Professor Samples, if I can't attack my opponent's character, I have nothing left. I thought, well, you get some points for candor.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
All right.
We've been talking about a number of fallacies in this series, and I hope our listeners are appreciating that we're really trying to teach in two ways. We're talking about what a good argument is. Here's how to construct a good argument. Here's the components. Here's how reasoning kind of works. On the other hand, we're pointing out the typical ways in which reasoning breaks down. And one of them that we've been doing in this series is we've been talking about problems of relevance, because remember in our little acrostic track, that letter R, if your premises are not relevant, connected, or pertinent to, you're not going to have a successful argument. And in previous shows, we've talked about diversions. We talked about diversions of humor and ridicule. And in our previous show, we talked about two very influential fallacies of relevance, or the lack thereof. We talked about the straw man and the red herring. I'd like to talk about one more, and maybe, I don't know if it's the granddaddy of fallacies of relevance, but I'll bet almost everybody knows what an ad hominem is.
Right.
You know, hominem is a Latin word for man, right? So the ad hominem is to attack the man. And this is your ultimate fallacy, because essentially what you do here is your opponent lays out their argument, and you ignore the argument of your opponent, and instead you attack their character. Now, what's critical there is this is one of the fallacies where you have to have two arguers, because the fallacy is committed when the first person actually presents an argument and the second person ignores the presented argument and goes after the character. So you got to have two arguers. And again, all of what we have been saying previously on the previous shows follows in suit, that in an argument, your responsibility as a person who is critiquing that argument is to do just that. Keep your focus on the argument. Do not give in to your knee-jerk reaction or to the accepted, the accepted context of throwing a zinger here or undermining people's motives and things like that. And of course, all of this again to say that to really critique other people's arguments, you got to listen to them.
Comes down to that, huh? Listening.
You got to listen to them. And if you don't listen to them, then inevitably your criticisms are going to miss the mark, because you haven't taken the time to know them. Now, let me bring back, however, a point that I think is important about virtue. I had one guy say to me, but Ken, some ad hominems are true. To which I say, yeah, some people have a bad character. Some people have character issues, undoubtedly. But I said to him, you mean, isn't it possible for an imperfect person to make a good argument? Well, if it's not possible for an imperfect to make a good argument, there's only been one person on this earth that had perfection. The rest of us are imperfect, but we think even a blind dog finds a bone once in a while, right? I think that you have to keep your focus on the argument, and again, it's teaching us that we really have to care more about truth. If we care about winning, go ahead and attack the character, because that'll probably win some points.
What if the argument entails something where his character is relevant to the truth of the argument?
That's a great question, Dave, and that is a limiting factor. You can critique character if character is the issue at hand.
Yeah.
In a courtroom, the prosecutor may put a witness on the stand and the defense says, wait a second here. This guy has been found guilty of lying. Mm-hmm. How can I trust the testimony? He has a bad character. The character is going to influence the testimony. Mm-hmm. He's not a credible witness. So the parameters are, it's not that we're saying it's always out of bounds to evaluate or critique character. You can critique character if character is an essential element within it. The problem is that oftentimes what the person has done in another context isn't really relevant to the argument that they're making. And again, we see this in many fields. We see it in politics. We also see it in the field of apologetics, right?
Now, there's this argument on the part of politicians that my private sexual life is irrelevant to my job as president.
Right.
Why am I being criticized
right.
for my private life? Why are you prying into my private life?
Yeah. And I think that when we hear that issue, I mean, we've had presidents. I'll take the president I may probably know the most about, John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. I think we know now with some very good evidence that President Kennedy was a serial adulterer, and that he, in fact, was very reckless in his sexual escapades. He's the leader of the free world, after all. What if he were in a situation where somebody could use that in blackmail? I mean, this isn't just any Johnny. Mm-hmm. This is John F. Kennedy. This is the president of the United States of America. This is the leader of the free world in the midst of the one of the great conflicts of the war that was taking place, so the Cold War. I think, Dave, it probably does come down to the question of what do I evaluate when I'm voting for someone? Mm-hmm. How much does their character relate to their decisions as president? Now, I know you know this. Some people would say it doesn't affect it at all.
I know. Well, look at the whole media at that time. Made no effort to expose this.
Yeah. So
what they were saying was, doesn't matter that he's this kind of a character.
Yeah.
It's okay for him to do this stuff and still.
And some of the books that have come out, by the way, written by people who really knew JFK, they said JFK thought this, you're not going to tell on me because I know some things about you.
Right.
So,
and I'm more powerful.
Unwritten law.
Right.
But your concern, I think, is very important. It doesn't mean you can never criticize character. If character is essential to the issue involved, then it's quite appropriate. And
yeah.
if I'm an attorney and I know this guy has lied on the witness stand, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
Right?
But I guess there's a big difference of opinion about whether that aspect of character, what Kennedy was involved in, disqualifies him to be president. Obviously, a lot of people didn't think so.
And I think there are probably plenty of people who think that way today. I mean, mm-hmm. I do think in how I think if we introduce Christian virtue and how we go about evaluating a leader. Now, let's look at David, King David. I mean, David was an incredibly endowed individual. I mean, he beats Wilt Chamberlain in the battle, Goliath. Mm-hmm. He's a musician. He's a scholar. He's a politician. undoubtedly, he must have been quite a handsome, strapping kind of like you, Dave. You know,
yeah, right.
Your namesake here. And yet here is King David who almost throws it all away. Some people, I think, and I think it's probably true of John F. Kennedy, I think in some ways he enjoyed the risk. It was exciting. And I think he enjoyed kind of that side of it. I will also tell you, though, I think he was actually a pretty effective president at times.
Yeah, it seemed that way.
Yeah. So, well, let's dig a little deeper here and talk about the ad hominem. So you're attacking the man instead of the argument. That's the irrelevance of it. Character issues can be dealt with if they're the issue at hand.
If they're important.
Now, there are, I think, at least three ways of committing the fallacy. There's the ad hominem abusive, the ad hominem circumstantial, and then the ad hominem tu quoque. Let's talk about the ad hominem abusive. This is just good old-fashioned name-calling. This is you just denounce the character of the person directly by insulting them. You say bad things. You say nasty, mean things about them. The political world is filled with that, but so is the apologetic world.
Hugh Ross is a compromiser.
We throw these accusations at people around pretty easily in many different contexts. So the ad hominem abusive is much the way we know this. It's a frontal assault. I'm going to make it very clear. I'm going to damage your character by calling you a bunch of names. That's the ad hominem abusive. Could I say that may not be the most hurtful? That may not be the most effective way. I think ad hominem circumstantial may be an even more effective.
You've learned the fine-tuning aspects of
the fallacy.
How to do this well.
Here's a more powerful fallacy.
If you want to do ad hominem, Ken's got it figured out.
Yeah, I do. Honestly, I think the ad hominem circumstantial is more powerful and it's harder to get you. I mean, if Joe calls me, a screaming lunatic, I've got enough doctors who say, Ken's on the scale, but he's not that far, right? But if you undermine motives, if you raise the question,
discredit.
Dave has this argument or Joe has this argument, but you know what? What you guys don't know is they have a vested interest. So, of course, Joe comes to that conclusion. Just look at how it positively impacts him. Sneaky. See, if I just call Joe a lughead, I can batter him up that way. But if I say, that Joe, you really got to be careful because he's so sneaky. He has a hidden agenda. Ooh. So this guy's not only bad, he's smart and bad. And those are the evil geniuses, right? So the circumstantial is you raise special circumstances in an attempt to discredit a person's character. So you say, maybe this candidate would like to take immigration. And he has liberal policies about immigration because he thinks that the people who will be added to the voting rolls will then vote for him. So he's not doing immigration because he cares about immigrants and because he wants a country that's safer and a country that's fairer. He's got a hidden agenda. He figures if he can pull this off, he can appeal to their voting. A hidden agenda. Why I think that works is because I think people are very susceptible that the sneakiest people are the worst people. They're really smart, and you're trying to say he's got a hidden motive. He's got an ulterior motive to some of that. And I think, again, in a political context, it's very important that a person responds and says, look, here's my response to that.
Crook.
I'm not a crook. Yeah. Richard Nixon.
He was a crook.
I think when you say, you have to say on television, I'm not a crook, things are not going well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, could I offer another description of this fallacy? Some of you know it by poisoning the well. Poisoning the well. If I can spread a rumor, or I can say, Dave takes the position that he does because he's going to benefit. He's not doing it for integrity's purpose. He's not concerned about the country. He's got a payoff. I'm damaging his character. I'm damaging his character. And like I said, I think that damages your character more than just me saying, that guy's a jerk. He's sneaky. He's got a plan. Because what happens when people can't trust you? What happens? The well has been poisoned. Every time now I hear you talking about Ken. Well, Ken. You can't trust him. You can't believe what he says. The secret's out. Poisoning the well is often known as the ad hominem circumstantial. Now, let me mention a third one. This is an interesting form of the ad hominem. It's accusing the other person of hypocrisy as an attempt to avoid personal criticism. The word quoque, tu quoque, means you too, not the Irish rock band. So you accuse me of hypocrisy. Let's say we're in a political debate, Dave, and your criticism is, I think there's some malfeasance here. I think Ken's policy needs to be investigated here. There's an anomaly. There's something not right about it. And I turn around, I ignore your criticism, and I say, yeah, but you shouldn't be bothered by me. Dave does it worse. You've got a bigger problem. Well, simply pointing to the hypocrisy in other people doesn't remove your own responsibility or your own fault. But don't people do that all the time? I mean, isn't being a sinner, couldn't being a sinner be described with quite a bit of merit that we're looking for somebody to blame? Right? I mean, I see that in my own life at times. Like something goes wrong and I'm thinking, well, it's because, well, who did it? Who can I blame it on? And then after a while I have to say, if there's any blame, I guess I got to own it. Right? So this is an interesting tactic. When somebody critiques your argument, or better yet, they point out maybe some hypocrisy, and it's relevant, you then just put out a bigger claim of hypocrisy. And in the midst of it all, you're hoping they'll ignore your problem and pay attention to his problem.
That's right.
The ad hominem. You attack the person. Now, of course, the question is, what do we do to try to avoid all of this?
Keep our mouths shut, I suppose.
I think the upshot of all of these lessons here is that just leave it alone. Don't get into discussions or arguments or
listen only.
Listen only.
Well, I think that we can do some things, and they can be some positive things. I think one thing you have to get away from is any kind of name calling. Just leave the character out of it. Now, if you're in a courtroom and this person has engaged in dishonesty, then obviously it has to be pointed out. But otherwise, you stay away from the character issues. You stay away from trying to transfer something to the fault of the other person. I think, again, you focus, you're idea oriented. You're focusing on the argument. And could I come back to something I said in a previous show? I think there's kind of a sense sometimes in us as human beings that if somebody disagrees with us about something fundamental, let's say somebody really disagrees with us politically. I've known both Democrats and Republicans who've kind of taken the position that if you're on the other side, something's wrong with you. An intelligent person couldn't take that position. Now you might say there is sometimes, some legitimacy. I mean, I find it very difficult for a person who believes in pro-life issues somehow to maybe ignore abortion, for example. So there may be some inconsistency in our moral system. We may compartmentalize rather than letting integrity run the whole scope. But I think the apologetics to the golden rule of apologetics is, it really involves this: I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the person. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. I remember when I worked at the Christian Research Institute, I worked with Walter Martin, and one of the things Martin was well known for was in the 1950s, he came to the conclusion that the Adventists were not a non-Christian cult, but that they were a quasi-Christian group and genuinely Christian. And not too long ago, I was interacting with some folks who are very critical. They feel Adventism is a cult. And I said, well, I think I need to extend the golden rule of apologetics and give them the benefit of the doubt. And the person responded to me by saying, oh, that's your fundamental mistake. They will never be honest with you. They'll always deceive you. They'll always hide from you. I said, well, I think I am thoughtful enough to know when I think somebody's double talking me. I'm going to extend the benefit of the doubt. If I begin to see that you're not worthy of the benefit of the doubt, then I might have to pull that back. Then I may have to say, now you're going to have to earn your own way. Because you've been less than honest or less than candid. Because, again, I think you have to do apologetics in a Christian-oriented way. And the Christian-oriented way is, I'm going to give the person the benefit of the doubt until they show me that I can't do that. So stay away from the character issues.
Now, you might, of course, be aware of wrong motives in your opponent, and you may be even convinced that those wrong motives are what's making him argue the way that he is. But what you're saying is that we shouldn't necessarily expose those wrong motives.
What I'm saying is, if he's presenting an argument, the argument is the issue. Now, he may be doing it for the wrong reasons, and you might suspect that he's doing it for the wrong reasons. But, Dave, could a person with bad motives still have a good argument?
Yes.
So I would say, unless that motive is central, unless it becomes a clear part of the argument, I think you're much better off to look at the argument.
You can't use that against him.
Yeah. Because flawed people still have good ideas. I mean, Albert Einstein was not a perfect man.
Right.
But he had some ideas that changed the world. So now if you're in let's say you're in a pastoral situation. Let's say you're in a parenting situation.
Then it's a little different. You're not in an argument.
Then I think you've stepped out of we're having
I'm just trying to think of, say you're in some political discussion over the question of legalizing drugs.
Yeah.
But you know that the person, your opponent, is really is a druggie.
Yeah. Dave, I would still say,
or say he's a cartel owner, but that's not generally known, but you know it.
I would. Well, that's an obvious. I mean, if a person has an addiction, is one thing.
He's dealing
if a person
drugs.
is involved in illegal activities as part of a cartel that wants to corrupt my kid and your kid, I mean, that's an illegal issue.
I know, but he's now one of your opponents. He's dealing illegally on the side, say, but he's your opponent politically.
Okay, let me give you an example.
And he's trying to argue with you about the question of whether we ought to allow
legalization.
Let me use an example.
I'm going
to make it a worse argument. I'm going to make it a more concerning issue.
Okay.
Adolf Hitler says, I got this really good idea. It's called the Autobahn. What do you think? Well, it's hard to imagine any evil man like Hitler could actually have a good idea. But the Autobahn was a good idea.
Yeah, it was a good idea, as was the Volkswagen.
He's got Porsche. Hey, how can we make a people's car?
Right.
And Dave, you bought one of those cars that was designed by Porsche. Well, that's my point. Technically, as a Christian, I mean, if I had knowledge that somebody was involved in illegal activity, I would have moral responsibilities, I believe. But I'm talking about the idea that anybody who presents an argument has to be perfect. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah,
all of us have flaws.
But this is he has an agenda, but you can't maybe prove that agenda.
And is the argument good? Let's say he does have. Let's go back to your example. Let's say he has an interest in the legalization of drugs because it's going to benefit him financially.
Right.
But he presents a case where doctors and law enforcement personnel and counselors and pastors, they look at it and they say, you know what? This just might work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at some point, I think the issue you're struggling with, and I think it's a realistic issue, when does the vested interest, when does the lack of credibility become the central issue at hand? And certainly in a courtroom.
It does.
Because
if I can prove.
If I'm a juror and you're up there telling a story and the attorney knows Dave's going to lie, I don't know anything about that. It's critical that the district attorney pop up and say, this guy has gone to jail for lying on the witness stand. So if the credibility issue relates to the issue at hand in a real way, then I think you have legitimacy of saying, wait, I've got to raise the character issue here. I'm not doing it to try to out the person. I'm not doing it to try to slam them. It's the character relates to the argument at hand. But, I mean, again, look at Albert Einstein. I mean, I know enough about Albert Einstein to know he wasn't a very good father or a husband.
Right.
But general relativity and the truth of it is independent of whether he was a good father and a good husband. And again, I come back to that more general point. If the only people that can make arguments are people with perfect character, then there's only one you can listen to.
Well, that's probably true also. He's the only one you should listen to.
Well, he has. Maybe you should listen to him mostly, right? More than others.
Right.
What I want to say here is that I think, Dave, most of the time the problem is not that we're letting people with bad motives off. I think most of the time people they know they don't have a good argument, so they're attacking the character of the person. There may be legitimate times where a person has a sneaky motive, but I think it happens more the other way. We run into this problem,
for instance, where judges are dictating policy by saying that it's okay to have abortion, it's okay to have gay marriage, it's okay to, I can't think of other things, but there's all these dictations that are coming down that are saying, hey, constitutionally, we can't stop these people from doing these things. It's wrong. What's the motive behind? Why are they saying this?
I think, though, that typically the way we adjudicate that problem, Dave, is we can only seriously challenge and say that a Supreme Court justice has a defective moral philosophy of life or a defective ideology when we can look at the Constitution and say he's obviously made a completely inadequate case, that is the only time we can accuse legitimately a Supreme Court justice of acting inappropriately, is when you can show that the case they're making doesn't justify. Then you can say, hey, you have no basis in law. You have no basis in theory. What are you doing here? I think you're much better off to give the person the benefit of the doubt and argue the facts. And I think that I think imperfect people can make good arguments. So, Christians may have concerns about people, that they live a lifestyle that maybe you wouldn't. I would say this. I think President John F. Kennedy was very reckless, could potentially be impeached. And in fact, there are a number of historians who say that had Kennedy not been assassinated, that second term may have really exposed certain things, which could have led to maybe him resigning. I mean, these are counterfactuals, right?
Right.
On the other hand, I think you have to give John F. Kennedy very high marks on handling the Cuban Missile Crisis. A number of the people, military leaders, wanted to attack. They were ready to go, and Kennedy pulled them back. And I think with retrospect, here's a guy who had a lot of foibles, a lot of problems, but I think he was a pretty good president, at least in some of the things that he did. Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln, not a churchgoer. How do we evaluate some of these issues?
Mm-hmm. So, Ken, it seems to me that in thinking about this a little bit when it comes to politics and what so many Americans have grown accustomed to and really disgusted by is the type of rhetoric going on, that what if we just avoided this one thing, the ad hominem fallacy, and focused on one issue. Let's say we have a presidential election coming up in less than 2 years. So let's say the candidates over the next 18 months go out there and they say, you know what, let's talk about what we think would be best for the economy, and not go to the usual ways that conservatives and liberals go to. Conservatives like to say the liberals are out to grow the government or whatever. Yeah, we have these things we like to say. On the other side, they just want to give tax breaks to the wealthy and punish the poor. Right. Well, let's talk about those. To me, those are ad hominem fallacies. You're distracting from the issue at hand. What if we just said, here's my political philosophy, and as you suggested earlier, here are the best arguments against that, and here are my responses to that. What if that happened?
Well, Dave mentioned earlier these PBS programs where they would have senators, they would have historians, they'd have military leaders, a variety, teachers,
judges.
They'd go back and forth. And what would you do in this circumstance? And what do you guys think over there? I mean, what if we did say we're tired of all this? And what if a man or a woman did exactly what you said? I've been studying American history. I'm a student of our political system. I think there are some things that are out of whack. Here's my philosophy. Here are the notes you can check. Here are my answers to the basic objections that people have. Have at it. I mean, what if we decided as Christian apologists that we're not going to let people attack people's character? We're not going to let people bully people and say things about them. If you bring a charge against somebody because they hold that the universe is either older than you think or younger than you think, then you bear the burden of that. And if you can't back it up, then you're going to have to suffer the consequences of that. I mean, we've been talking as if the political scene is the only place. It may be the best example, but I see this within Christianity, where I see this in Christian apologetics. Why not say, Dave, I know you think that this isn't going to work, but I'm going to try it anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give it a go.
Well, the place to probably start to try it would be in the area of Christian apologetics.
Yeah. Where
we supposedly all subscribe to the scriptural principles of honesty, integrity, and
yeah. Now, what if somebody says what you are identifying as an ad hominem is not really an ad hominem? That is, if I think Hugh Ross is a compromiser, I have reasons to back up why I think that's the case. And here are the reasons, and they actually lay out a case. I guess you'd have to see what the case is, right?
Well, I mean, if their central argument is that Hugh is acting inappropriately, that there is a character flaw, they could make their case for that. But that's not usually the way they do it. They'll ignore Hugh's arguments for why the universe is an ancient universe, and they'll say that he's only doing that because he wants acceptability with the scientific community. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know why he rejects evolution if he wants the scientific.
He's got a funny way to do it.
Yeah. So I think that I think there are times where you have to raise character issues. I mean, there are times you have church discipline. There are times where somebody makes an accusation, and let's say I'm an elder, or let's say I'm a pastor, or let's say I'm just in the congregation and somebody says, I went to Ken's class and he insulted me and acted inappropriately. They are bringing a charge. In our church, the elders would want to hear the other side. They would have to go about trying to resolve those kinds of things. I would propose. Wouldn't you want somebody to give you the benefit of the doubt? I mean, I would. I would really appreciate it if somebody came along and said, Ken has this idea, and you know what? I think he's a thoughtful guy. I don't agree with the idea, and I don't understand why he does it. But on the first brush, I'm gonna let him lay it out. Tell me, persuade me. And I remember a number of years ago, I like Walter Martin, on Seventh-day Adventism, Walter and I thought, well, there are different kinds of Adventism, but there is a branch of Adventism that is authentically Christian. We took a lot of heat for that. Walter more than me, but I took heat for that too. And I've taken heat for other controversial issues, but I've essentially said, look, I could be wrong, but here's what I think. Here's my case. Evaluate that case. I hope you'll give me the benefit of the doubt by entertaining my ideas and my arguments. Before you would move to the idea that Ken's a compromiser, I hope that you would say, let's hear Ken out. And I think that's a Christian attitude. Now, Dave, of course, raises questions, and I think those are legit. A parent to a child, a law enforcement officer to an illegal activity, the courtroom. Well, I think those no longer is it an academic discussion. It is now potentially somebody is doing something illegal, or somebody is potentially in danger. So that, does a police officer give the benefit of the doubt to the person? I've known a number of police officers. They're immediately, what neighborhood is this? Who is this person?
Right.
What do I know about the crimes that are committed? I think it's very difficult. I think it would be very difficult for a police officer to say, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to this guy over here. So those are circumstances where you may have to deal with it. Now, of course, I would still raise the question, you have to be very careful about judging a person as being a potential hoodlum because of their race. You have to be very careful about things like that, or you are going to violate the Constitution of the United States. You also have to be very careful as a Christian that you don't bring accusations against another human being, or maybe even better, a brother or sister in Christ, that is wrong. And so stay away from the character issue. Stay with the facts. Follow the golden rule of apologetics. At least try to. And I think we move forward. I think that logic does a great thing for us. It helps us to order our thinking. It helps us to bring us back to reality. It sets our priorities. At this point, Joe's made an argument. I'm going to really try to take that argument seriously and see if it really does stack up. If it does, I may say, you know what? You're right, Joe. I'm on your side. That really has merit. If not, I'm going to say, I think there's some flaws here. Maybe you want to take them back and sand them down the rough edges and bring it back, and I'll consider it again. That's something we haven't talked about. Maybe we should. One thing that I think is important is just because an argument is fractured or has problems doesn't mean that it's irreparable. I mean, you might bring up an argument for fine-tuning, and somebody may come along and say, well, you've forgotten A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. But see, I can take that and go back and say, does this help? So arguments don't necessarily have to be dead on arrival. They might be you may be able to rehabilitate an argument.
All right, there you go. Okay, great stuff. We hope you agree. Thanks for hanging in there for this series on Logic 101. A few more to come. Hope you're learning a lot, as I'm sure I am. Well, I know I am. I'm sure you are as well, Dave.
Yes.
This is Joe Aguirre with a reminder that the goal of apologetics is not victory, but truth. Thanks for listening, and join us for the next edition of Straight Thinking. We would like to personally invite you to join with us by becoming a monthly partner. Simply go to reasons.org/monthly partner. Also, find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at RTB_official. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and search for Reasons to Believe 1. That's Reasons to Believe, all one word, and the number 1.